All right, I'm going to do a World War III update. Just finished doing most of my research. It's a little bit later in the night. It's probably past 7 o'clock there now, and it's still 27 degrees. Like super, super, super hot out. So, anyway, long story short, I don't have a lot, but what I have I think is kind of significant, so I'll just basically... There's a whole bunch of traffic here. Yeah, so I guess if I have to talk about anything, it's going to be pretty much one major thing, and that has to do with, it looks like Turkey is switching sides to go with Russia, which I had a suspicion that was going to happen after that coup. Young lad got his license, nice. And the thing I was wondering was, who did the coup? Was it really a U.S.-backed coup, or was it a Russian-backed coup? But it really does seem to look like that the Russians benefited from a U.S.-backed coup, which makes me think it wasn't a U.S.-backed coup. I mean, we don't know how dirty this game really is. I would suspect that an agreement was probably made between Russia and Turkey to ditch the United States. Now, slow it down a bit here. Can't see. It's such a bad corner right here. Anyway, the thing is that I can't see shit. Getting right into the sun. The coup benefited the Russians, because the Russians, we know, almost immediately before and after the coup, we're talking with Turkey about continuing the gas pipeline thing that they had going on. I can't see that, but okay. My windshield's so freaking dirty. I gotta wash the inside of the windshield. Can't see nothing. So anyway, I got they were already moving on that before the coup happened, and the coup looked like it was, like there was, fighter jets in the air that were ready to shoot, that could have easily shot down Erdogan, but they didn't. So it's kind of suspicious. It was kind of like the coup, like, name me one coup in history that's foiled without massive bloodshed. Name me one coup that was foiled without, like, a ton of people dying on both sides, and it just happened that they won the struggle. It usually never, either a coup is usually successful, or it's a long drawn-out civil war type of thing, and it doesn't happen, right? Sometimes they're foiled, but most of the time they're not foiled. They don't get foiled. I just got to slow it down a bit. So anyway, long story short, I don't know. I suspect that the Russians and the Turks worked on this together. The question is, why? Well, as dirty as everything's going to be in the politics, this guy tight behind me. Why are you tight behind me, man? It's like it's a 40 zone. The thing is it's quite obvious that the Russians are going to make out good on this one. And now I think this has more of a play to do with Syria than anything. But we'll have to wait and see. So what could be happening is that the extortion that Turkey was doing with, basically, Germany pay us this kind of money, or we're going to let a whole bunch of refugees go in waves, and they have been doing that. Turkey is no friend to Europe, that's for sure. Government, people might be fine, but the government, no. And, Turkey with their, Erdogan talking about the rise of the new Ottoman Empire, taking up all of North Africa right through to, they do stop at the Chinese border. Why? Because the Turks might not be afraid of the United States, because they know the United States won't go after them directly. They'll destabilize them in a different way. But they know the Chinese wouldn't put up with any shit whatsoever. Simply due to that, the Chinese don't have all this political correctness and, UN Security Council and stuff like that. They don't deal with that stuff. They get a country in their sights, they'll just crush it in rebellion. But there's no real bad blood between Turkey and China. They're going to do business. So, obviously Erdogan's not going to say, well, we're going to expand the Ottoman Empire into China. That would just be a bad business decision. a bad geopolitical decision, whatever. So what they'd rather do is say, okay, well, we'll have our Islamic Caliphate all throughout Europe. We'll have it all throughout, all throughout the top of the Middle East, North Africa, the Middle East, and they'll be happy with that. So that's what they're going for. Now with Russia, again, Turkey, they've suffered under the Russian sanctions. Maybe not extremely, but it has hurt them, and it set them back quite a bit. And obviously the United States can't cover the losses of the Russian sanctions for Turkey. They can't cover it. I mean, they're already spread too thin. It would be just too obvious that they can't do it. So deal was made probably between Moscow and Ankara to say, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to bury the hatchet. You let us kick the shit out of leave Assad alone. Let us kick the shit out of the ISIS guys, and everything will be good. And you stay out of our way. We'll stay out of your way. You can have your caliphate. The Russians don't care if Europe gets destroyed. It is obvious too that Russia does want the UN gone, EU gone, and the United States. That's their main enemy. They wouldn't be enemies if it wasn't for U.S. foreign policy on behalf of Israeli Greater Israel Project, which does, everything you see in the Middle East is really a war against Russia and China when you really understand what's going on. It's the survival of the petrodollar. It's many agendas, but at the obvious one, that's what it is. Anybody that is pro-Russia or China is going to be destabilized. Why? They're not using the right currency, and that's what it's about. Regime change is about that. So the thing is Assad is not going down. Even some of the U.S. and I guess U.S.-backed rebels, which some of the you have to understand, ISIS is made up of about probably 1,100 different jihadi groups, give or take. And with that, it brings them into a real big problem that they're losing. Like the Syrian Arab Army and Hezbollah and the Iranians and the Russians are really clobbering the shitballs out of these ISIS mercenaries. And I can imagine also the reason why the U.S. is so upset every time they kill these ISIS guys and say, oh no, these are they're rebels, they're intertwined with the ISIS guys. Well, then they're ISIS guys. If they're intertwined, there's no difference between them. They're working together to overthrow Assad. So the Russians have been basically calling the bluff of the U.S. central bankers, saying, you just tell us where your moderate rebels are, and we won't blow them up. But they can't. Why? Because that's where their CIA agents and Mossad agents are. You know what I mean? That type of thing. So I can imagine the death toll amongst U.S. mercenaries and secret agents, British, all them, they must be getting pretty high by now. But we're not going to hear about it on the mainstream news. I can only imagine what these guys are being paid. Some people say they probably get $250,000 per deployment. That's probably, that's a lot of hush money. Now, they're probably not in high numbers. These are the guys that are guiding, probably, you can't just give a jihadi a tow missile and tell him, here, go blow up some tanks. You have to train the guy how to use the thing. And these tow missiles, they run out of missiles after a while, you know what I mean? They have to be replenished there's only one way they're really going to be replenished, and that's from the U.S. central banking system. Yeah, the tow missiles are the ones they got from Germany, but it's the same old. It's all one system. The German weapons are the American weapons, and it's all the same banking system that's paying for it all, robbing the wealth from us to give to the war machine, for regime change for the oligarchies. You know what I mean? Like it's played out obvious, and it's even starting to weep its way into the mainstream media of who's backing who. And even a couple of weeks ago, I don't know if it was a slip or whatever, or they didn't realize the wording they were using, but they pretty much said, Assad said, this is on the CBC, the main propaganda channel in Canada. Assad said, this is their work, that ISIS is going to be just completely wiped out within the next few months. And how Assad is destroying ISIS, but killing the U.S.-backed mercenaries. That pretty much word for word what they said. Well, these U.S.-backed mercenaries for regime change. Well, right there, isn't that illegal to do? That's war against another. Like, there is no reason to do regime change in Syria other than for Israel. That's it. So yeah, I think the plan is really getting foiled. And there's also the other problem is loyalties, the backstab. We're talking about the Middle East here, right? Do you really think the Turkish government's going to stay loyal to anybody? No. I think even the Turkish government is probably saying, if we keep messing with the Russians, they will wipe us off the map. Or, what I suspected happened, is the Russians said, you either come with us and stop arming ISIS and leave Assad alone, or we're going to arm the Kurds to the teeth. And there will be no Turkey if the Kurds get armed to the teeth. They will be completely wiped out in a civil conflict that could last decades, right? So I guess self-preservation comes in as, well, the Russians can do more damage to the Turks just via their proximity, let alone it'd be so easy for Russia to arm Turkish, anti-Ankara Turkish Kurds, right? They would have no problem arming these guys up and destabilize and do regime change in Turkey. They could do it if they wanted. So the Russians say, look, here's the downside. You're going to make money off the gas pipeline. We're not going to go to war, and that's pretty much it. Like you're basically going to get away from the Anglo-American Empire. You might even be able to start to use our currency, if common sense prevails. And I think probably within 10 years, Turkey will no longer be a part of NATO. There's no doubt about that. Turkey is a wild card to NATO because it's the largest NATO member. And the main reason why Turkey became a NATO member was simply so that it would play well with Israel. This is openly known. So it's kind of getting to the point where, okay, now what? Now what does the U.S. do on this? They basically lost the narrative here. And I'm not picking on the U.S. people. I'm picking on the Anglo-American Empire. It's failing. It's failing all over the world in front of us. If you're a really wealthy person, you might want to find a better place to put your cash than the bank. And keep in mind, in a few years, cash will not exist. That's why what the bankers are doing with this cashless society is two things. We know that the bankers, were basically stealing the money through bailouts. We know that. That's one way they're sucking up all the cash. They have to get this cash out of the world in order to destroy it. If they can destroy it, they can have a one world currency after. But until people give up their cash, they can't get rid of it all. Now, it gets worse than that. Because in order for this to play out, the amount of suffrage to the common person is going to be excruciatingly bad. So, put food away. I can't stress that enough. It may happen today, it may happen tomorrow, who knows? But these wild cards are showing their hand. And again, when you start to see Syrian moderate rebels, so to speak, or ISIS guys, starting to switch side to fight for, with the Russians and the Iranians and the Assyrians, that tells you that, yeah, Assad's probably right, that yes, Syria will be retaken. And as Syria stabilizes, Europe will be destabilized even more. On top of that, again, not covered on the mainstream media, the Greek banks, the Italian banks, the German banks, the Irish banks, they're all taking a massive hit right now. They're pretty much getting shadow bailouts. The German banks too. They're all shadow bailouts. They're not talking about it this time around. But what happens when people just start noticing that they're getting gradually more poor? Well, rule of law will disappear at some point, and when it does, I think very, very understandably people are going to be pissed. When, well, like Gerald Celente says, when people lose everything, they lose it. And I think that's going to be obvious as hell after the next major financial hit. Now that said, the only thing keeping the stock market up, quite simply, you guessed it, is the bailout money and the printing. Printing is a bailout. That's what's keeping the economy going. There's nothing else keeping the economies going. The Canadian economy up here. It looks like there's been no growth pretty much since Trudeau took office. Maybe Harper gave up the election on purpose, knowing that it was going to go down on his watch. So, that could have been a geopolitical move on his behalf. I guess this guy doesn't want to pass. Whatever. So maybe that's what's happening. So where's Justin Trudeau in all this when our country's in a approaching a 2008 type collapse very soon. He's off at the frickin' Tragically Hip concert. Sure, great. I know Gordon Downey's got cancer and it's his last run on stage, but even at that, you know, best wishes to Gordon Downey. I know cancer is probably going to take the guy. It's a nasty disease, but we got a country of 36 million people that are about to get a bitch slap, an economic bitch slap that they're not ready for. And we're not going to see it probably come as a flash in the pan thing, but we will probably see it coming as, you know, just gradually more poor. Again, stagnation of the economy. That's what we're seeing now. And we'll probably also see it come in as, you know, as a little bit of a, you know, just there's no growth. There's no economic growth. There hasn't been any economic growth in Canada pretty much since Trudeau took over. And that's very scary when you think about it, because they took over in last October. And, yeah. So what that's telling me is that there's no plan for the Canadian economy. It is going to suffer everything Europe suffered. And if you've seen the debt of BC, Ontario, and Quebec, let alone a few other provinces, man, when it hits here, it is going to hit us astronomically hard. I mean, astronomically hard. I've always said Canada never really hit the 2008 collapse. We still have interest rates in the Canadian banking system. They haven't dropped them off to nothing yet. We still had a growing economy under the Harper government. Not a, you know, a brilliantly growing economy, but growth is growth. And sure enough, yeah, it's like we don't have that right now. So what's Canada going to do when the war starts? Well, we're going to have to jump in on it to kickstart our economy. Meaning even guys my age may be drafted. Now, there's no talks of this yet, but there will be. Look, Jean Chrétien put up a good fight saying, we're not just going to jump in the Afghanistan war because we want to know who the culprits are, yada yada. But trust me, he was ready to go all along. But, you know, he was also thinking about re-election. So one of the things he was doing, quite simply put, is, okay, well, I'll pretend we don't want to go to war, but we'll wait till the public sways a bit, and then we'll do it, you know. So after 9/11 and all that, it was easy to sway people a couple of months after. Trust me, nobody in Canada wanted to go to war. Canadians were asking, why the fuck are we going to war in Afghanistan? You know what I mean? It was ridiculous, right? You know, Saddam was over in Iraq, Bin Laden was over somewhere else. You know, he might have been in Afghanistan, but it didn't mean we had to tear the entire country apart for one man, you know, and a handful of jihadis. But that was the beginning of the war on terror. And considering that new boss, same as the old boss, and everybody's kind of integrated on the same system, it really, really makes it obvious what you know, that we're going to go to war with Russia. The difference is Russia isn't Afghanistan. Russia isn't Iraq or Syria. Russia is a much bigger player. There are people out there who really don't believe that Russia or China is going to put up much of a fight. That, oh yeah, U.S. and NATO will just walk right through them, no problem. I beg to differ. World War I was only supposed to last 2 weeks. 4 years later, thousands of lives later. World War II was only supposed to last 6 months tops. 5 years later. The Syrian uprising is in its 6th year. You know, I mean, it's leaning on the downside of a decade here, you know? Wow, everybody's driving so freaking tight to me. Like, I'm not going to go any fast. I'm already doing 100. So, bottom line, the things going on in Syria, I think, are starting to really show their hand of what they're really about, what they're trying to accomplish. And I also notice that you are seeing a lot of people starting to jump ship in different levels of government, etc., etc. And you're also starting to see a lot of people, you know, figure out the game, that it is that rigged, that it is, oh my god, I can't see nothing with it. I gotta wash my windshield. People behind me probably say, who's this guy talking to? But the other thing to keep in mind is, while all this is going on, another kind of big significant thing is how the war's just expanded a little bit in the obvious direction. And probably not for the reasons people think. The big thing now in the mainstream media is Russia illegally using Iranian bases to launch bomber strikes. Now, the Russians have come out and said, and I probably already reported on this, that they were basically didn't want to lose any ground. They don't want to deploy Russian troops to Syria, but they don't want to lose any ground because right now it's getting into the do or die mode, right? They want to maintain that hold that they've got. So what they want to do is keep the bombing runs as close as possible, but not only as close as possible, but surround everywhere as much as possible. Now, that said, we know about Saudi Arabia and Iran fighting with the Houthis. So there can only be one thing to do here. This is keep Iran safe. You need to put Russia in Iran. And, yeah, that's pretty much what the Russians are doing. Hey, where'd everybody go? There was like 5 cars behind me and they're all gone. And they're all driving like 30 feet behind my bumper. And they're all gone. And maybe I put them all in the ditch, I don't know. But anyway, bottom line, Russia is now sending Tu-22s out of Iran to do their bombing runs. And I guess Su-34s and Su-24s, etc., etc. So they're doing bombing runs from Iran. That means there's no possible way for Israel to even think of doing airstrikes in Iran now, because A, the Russians have helped the Iranians out with the S-300 missile systems, stuff like that. Now there's a risk of actually hitting. Could you imagine what happens to Israel if they hit a Russian target? That significantly will put, Russia will never hit them directly, but it will send a flood of jihadis right into Israel. They'll suddenly have the problem. Again, why not a single jihadi has attacked Israel, their number one enemy? You know, I think is the main. It kind of makes Israel look pretty darn guilty for backing. Plus, you had Mossad agent generals come forward saying, yeah, you know, ISIS is a Mossad creation with, you know, the U.S. State Department and the CIA and all that. And the CIA and the State Department are also, you know, fighting as well. I'm going to peel off some speed here. Holy this. So that's going on. Now, on the other side of the where. You know, it's becoming so obvious now, and you have all these major players out there talking about how, yes, the United States is obviously trying to start a war with Russia and China. What they're trying to do is provoke them into striking first. And there's something to keep in mind. I can't remember if it was Len or Khrushchev that had the theory that if you believed your enemy was about to strike you, you preemptively strike them first. Now that said, that's the old Soviet mindset. And I do believe they still stick to that kind of mindset. But not to the degree that you would think. Where, okay, let's overthrow the government of Ukraine, and that should provoke a Russian response into Eastern Europe. You're boiling Eastern Europe into a full-scale war. Once they're into a full-scale war, then we can wear down the Russian troops by killing, you know, Poles and Czechs and people in Georgia and wherever. And basically, you know, have a war there. That, I think, was the original intention. Get the Eastern Europeans killed, then when NATO goes in, they can just sweep up the Russians, you know. But it didn't work. The Russians didn't fight. They didn't use that preemptive strike thing. So now the level's a little higher. Now, somebody accused me of sensationalism in my last World War III title, saying, you know, all-out war in the Ukraine. Saying, you know, keep to the facts. Well, I am keeping to the facts. This is a high possibility. Russia has just deployed 40,000 troops, tanks, and whatever, and they've been deploying stuff on the borders of the Ukraine for these insurgencies that they're expecting from these Ukrainian, militias that want to go and do sabotage. One guy will call him a freedom fighter, the other guy will call him a terrorist, whatever. But the case in point is, you have Ukrainian soldiers or agents that are trying to go into Russia to attack Russian things. And yes, the Ukrainians have shelled into Russia. Russia hasn't done a full response. But they're going to hold their border. So they're going to disguise it as a drill, of course, but they're there to take out these Ukrainians. They're never going to get in. Russia's never going to get, they're not going to be duped into a war with Ukraine all out. They'll pick them off on the border. They can pull this off. It's easy enough for Russia to do this. They have the resources to do this. They have the manpower to do this. They have the strategy. They have everything on their side. Ukraine doesn't. So they're not going to be duped into a war with Ukraine easily, no matter how much NATO pushes. So no, they're not going to do these preemptive strikes. They're not going to do it. I've always said, yes, the only thing that provokes a full Russian response is an invasion into Russia. Yes, this is true. I believe the Russians will fully respond. They've said they would fully respond, but they're not going to go after the cannon fodder, because again, the Russians don't need to do a full rolling of tanks into Ukraine. They can defend the Crimea. They've got nukes there. They've got tanks there. They've got attack helicopters, and they can defend their border from the border. They don't have to go into the Ukraine, because 15 minutes of Russia firing back at the Ukrainian forces, there'll be no more Ukrainian forces if they're on the border. They're going to have the upper hand. They got the manpower, the firepower, whatever. Doesn't mean they won't take losses, but they're not going to take many losses. I'm just up here in Otter Lake, kind of out for a Friday night drive. Just didn't feel like going home yet. It's like, it's Friday, I'm kind of bored. Want to do something. So I'm like, I'll come to Otter Lake. So that said, it does increase the tensions between Ukraine and Russia for sure. And of course, this comes at a time, again, you got another Syrian boy that they're trying to, demonize Assad. And there are a lot of people that watch the mainstream media and really believe that Assad is this horrible dictator doing all these evil things for no reason. He does do bad things. He is a dictator. You can't run the Middle East unless you're a dictator. I know that. And he's not a good guy. He's not a saint. But he's definitely not the mass evil that they're making him out to be. He's defending his country. And so every time you hear of these chemical attacks and everything like that, when the forward UN observers do actually make the assessment, it always turns out the same thing. It was the rebels that did it. The barrel bomb thing. I don't know why anybody would even mention barrel bombs when they're dropping 500-pounder and 750-pounder and 2,000-pound JDAMs on these, these fab bombs, these Russian fab bombs, that take out like 4 city blocks. And they're worried about a barrel bomb that'll blow up 100 square feet. You know what I mean? Like, that's just stupid, and they're killing terrorists. So, that type of thing. So we see the propaganda still going, but I think Syria is kind of lost to the Anglo-American Empire. It is lost. It's not going to. They're not going to make it through. Nothing going on up here either. Yeah. Well, that was interesting anyway. Kids out here playing ball. Otter Lake, all the kids play ball right on the edge of the highway. Like, I don't think you could have picked a town where people built their houses closer to the road. It's like, all these old towns are like that. Everybody built like 10 feet from the road. It's kind of funny, But anyway, yeah. So with that going on, last thing that was happening a couple of weeks ago, which I guess I'll end up on this. I'm sure there's stuff I'm forgetting. Like always, there's always something that you miss, right? There's a lot of, because of this so-called supposed coup in Turkey a couple of weeks ago, there has been a lot of anti-U.S. sentiment in Turkey, and protests and riots and everything like that. Everybody wants, at the embassy, to the point where we had 5,000 people protesting around a U.S. military base. And if that doesn't make you kind of Benghazi enough, in these bases is where the U.S. store their nukes. Okay? And what's scary about it is you have all these potential jihadis, okay, basically surrounding an area of nukes, U.S.-made nukes. Now, it's not like they could use these nukes easily. You need it. They're aircraft deliverable nukes, I'm pretty sure. The average jihadi is not going to find a way to move this thing with a cloth-wing biplane, you know what I mean? He's not going to be able to do that. But he can, extract the components of it and, make briefcase nukes, etc., etc. Now, where it gets interesting is this also tells you the beginning of the death of NATO in what comes next, which pretty much, if you haven't already heard about it this week, I'd be surprised, but basically, they took all the nukes, like 50 nukes, from the bases in Turkey, okay? And they've sent them to Georgia. And at first it was like, okay, why is the U.S. sending nukes to Georgia? Well, again, if Turkey, which clearly, I mean, I think they may not be switching sides, but I'd be very surprised if they weren't switching sides. To me, everything suggests that they've switched sides from the Anglo-American Empire to the Eurasian Pacific Empire of Russia and China. That's what they're telling me by all the things they've done in the last past, 2 months. So, apologizing to Russia, working out a gas pipeline with Russia. This is what Turkey's doing. Blaming the United States for the coup, etc. in Turkey. And the list goes on and on and on. And we see a much more, even the hinting of Ankara might, Ankara might basically, in a nutshell, help Russia and Iran defeat ISIS. I don't know if I can turn in this road, but I'm going to try to turn. So, I better not go in the ditch. So, I better head back home. I didn't put that much gas money in there, so. Got lots of gas, though, but I would have to. Just out for that Friday night drive. Now I'm heading away from the sun, so it won't be quite so blind. I gotta clean this windshield. Oh my God, it's so dirty. It's dirty on the inside, not the outside. Well, it's dirty on the outside too, but it's really dirty on the inside. So as soon as you're into that evening sun, it's like, I can't see nothing. So if the United States is pulling nukes away from Turkey being the largest NATO member, that is a big, significant geopolitical move. That is something worth mentioning. Now, putting nukes in Georgia, I don't know if that's just a place because of convenience, that it was the closest and safest NATO base or U.S. military base that they could store this at, or what gives. I don't exactly know. But that's where they put them. Now, how does Russia view this? They now have U.S.-made nukes, even with all these missile systems and everything else. On top of that, they now have U.S. nukes, 50 of them, at a time when you have B-52s buzzing their borders, in the Baltics, right on their borders. They've got 50 U.S. nukes on their borders. Now, for the Russians not to be a little bit concerned about this would be, or even just to say that they are concerned about it, I think is probably an overstatement beyond belief. I think that it's going to become very obvious that when Russia said, if you put these missile systems, the ballistic, anti-ballistic missile systems too close to us, we may have to take it out in a preemptive strike. Now, before they do this, there's another thing that, getting back to what Lenin said about doing the preemptive strike. They know that a NATO preemptive nuclear strike or a U.S. nuclear strike on Russia is an all-out strike. There is no a handful of cities getting hit or whatever. It's everything is coming at them. So if they really truly do believe that they are going to be hit, if they truly believe that there is no way out of it, that we are going to have a war, they may actually strike first. This is what NATO wants all along. Oh, Dodge Charger coming at me. Must be Benny. I just got passed by the General Lee. Very cool. I wish I can't wait to get a dash cam onto this thing. Yeah, nice bright orange Dodge Charger General Lee. He's had it for years. He's got like 5 muscle cars, that guy. But anyway, back to task at hand here. So one of the last things that the Russians were saying, very simply put, was that if we went to war, it would be a full-out nuclear exchange. And if they figured that was happening, the sign was not, they would strike first. The question is, how do they strike? Well, they're going to strike full force, is how they're going to strike. And I think that we're not there yet, but it could happen as a flash-in-the-pan thing, very quickly, very easily, with all this saber-rattling and all the destabilization around the world. I don't think it's a matter of if, but just when, And I also think that we could be seeing times, again, more like a Kursk-style incident, flash-in-the-pan style incident. But I do believe the Russians will tolerate fighter jets and ships, a few things happening long before they would do a preemptive strike. So that's the good news. The bad news is everything else. When they finally say enough is enough and we're not going to take it anymore, and we're going to blow you guys out of the water. Yeah, that's going to be a scary day. Anyway, I'm going to find a place to pull over here. With a bicycle. You watch all these kids, like little kids always out on the road. Because you know they're not paying attention to you. I could go off that way. You mean there's nothing to do up in Otter Lake, too? That kind of sucks. More kids. All these kids here. And yet people drive through here at like insanely fast speeds for like no reason. Like the kids literally have their feet draped over the sidewalk onto the road, right? And some of them, they're just sitting there playing tennis or football or hockey or whatever on the road. Wait, but some girls, why not? I don't know who it was, but... Nothing happened at the store. I have to get through the town before I can pull over and whatever. Maybe I'll go see my buddy Chum. I don't know, I just don't feel like being on the internet tonight. I don't mind blogging. I'll do my internet work Saturday. That's when I'll do it. So anyway, yeah, I thought that was big news. I don't think the Russians again are going to do anything too drastic, but I don't think they're going to do anything too drastic, but I do think that, this would definitely have gotten their attention. So, time to head back. More kids on the damn road. Holy shit, these kids walk fast. Like, I swear to God, those kids covered, like, half the town faster than I could. Yeah. More kids on the damn road. This kid's doing a catwalk and I should hit the horn behind him. They're getting right in the center of the road. Probably some of my... I want to make sure they see me. Yeah, not looking. These two kids are like just... yeah. Playing on the highway. Yeah. I think that's it for the kids on the road. Past the town now. Okay, so I guess that's about it. I'm just gonna... Cut it off. I'm gonna go see my buddy Chum. I haven't seen him in a while, so... Yeah, so anyway, if you like this kind of content, please consider making a donation to the channel. Not the most professional. Just kind of showing you where I am. Anyway, next to that, yeah, links down below, so thank you very much to everybody who has. If you want to make a couple of bucks for yourself, my TSU link is also down below. I don't know if the TSU site's still working. If it is, go for it. If not, I'll probably take that link off pretty soon. Next to that, rate, subscribe, share, comment, like, be true to yourselves, be true to others. Always do the right thing, and have yourselves a great day. Alright, so, I'm still in drive. My bad. Alright, I'm going to do a World War III update. Just finished doing most of my research. It's a little bit later in the night. It's probably past 7 o'clock there now, and it's still 27 degrees. It's like super, super, super hot out. So, anyway, long story short, I don't have a lot, but what I have I think is kind of significant, so I'll just basically... what's on here? Something going on at home? There's a whole bunch of traffic here. Anyway, yeah, so I guess if I have to talk about anything, it's going to be pretty much one major thing, and that has to do with, it looks like Turkey is switching sides to go with Russia, which I had a suspicion that was going to happen after that coup. Young lad got his license, nice. And the thing I was wondering was, who did the coup? Was it really a U.S.-backed coup, or was it a Russian-backed coup? But it really does seem to look like that the Russians benefited from a U.S.-backed coup, which makes me think it wasn't a U.S.-backed coup. I mean, we don't know how dirty this game really is. I would suspect that an agreement was probably made between Russia and Turkey, to ditch the United States. Now, slow it down a bit here. Can't see. Such a bad corner right here. Anyway, the thing is that I can't see shit. Getting right into the sun. The coup benefited the Russians because the Russians, we know, almost immediately before and after the coup, were talking with Turkey about continuing the gas pipeline thing that they had going on. I can't see that, but okay. My windshield's so freaking dirty. I gotta wash the inside of the windshield. Can't see nothing. So anyway, I got they were already moving on that before the coup happened, and the coup looked like it was, like there was, fighter jets in the air that were ready to shoot, that could have easily shot down Erdogan, but they didn't. So it's kind of suspicious. It was kind of like the coup. Like, name me one coup in history that's foiled without massive bloodshed. Name me one coup that was foiled without like a ton of people dying on both sides, and it just happened that they won the struggle. It usually never, either a coup is usually successful, or it's a long drawn out civil war type of thing, and it doesn't happen, right? Sometimes they're foiled, but most of the time they're not foiled. They don't get foiled. I just got to slow it down a bit. So anyway, long story short, I don't know. I suspect that the Russians and the Turks worked on this together. The question is why? Well, as dirty as everything's going to be in the politics, this guy tight behind me. Why are you tight behind me, man? It's like it's a 40 zone. The thing is it's quite obvious that the Russians are going to make out good on this one. And now I think this has more of a play to do with Syria than anything, but we'll have to wait and see. So what could be happening is that the extortion that Turkey was doing with, basically, Germany pay us this kind of money or we're going to let a whole bunch of refugees go in waves, and they have been doing that. Turkey is no friend to Europe, that's for sure. Government, people might be fine, but the government, no. And, Turkey with their, Erdogan talking about the rise of the new Ottoman Empire, taking up all of North Africa right through to, they do stop at the Chinese border. Why? Because the Turks might not be afraid of the United States because they know the United States won't go after them directly. They'll destabilize them in a different way. But they know the Chinese wouldn't put up with any shit whatsoever. Simply due to that, the Chinese don't have all this political correctness and, UN Security Council and stuff like that. They don't deal with that stuff. They got a country in their sights, they'll just crush it in rebellion. But, there's no real bad blood between Turkey and China. They're going to do business. So, obviously Erdogan's not going to say, well, we're going to expand the Ottoman Empire into China. That would just be a bad business decision, a bad geopolitical decision, whatever. So what they'd rather do is say, okay, well, we'll have our Islamic Caliphate all throughout Europe. We'll have it all throughout, the top of the Middle East, North Africa, the Middle East, and they'll be happy with that. So that's what they're going for. Now with Russia, again, Turkey, they've suffered under the Russian sanctions. Maybe not extremely, but it has hurt them. It set them back quite a bit. And obviously the United States can't cover the losses of the Russian sanctions for Turkey.